Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeremy Ryland. I'm the presenter for today's webinar. I'm going to start with a trivia question. Let's say you had $1 and you invested that dollar and it doubled every single day for 30 days. How much money would you have at the end of the 30-day period? So you had $1 and that dollar doubled every day for 30 days. How much money would you have? The answer is pretty shocking. It's just under $537 million. Now you're probably wondering, well, I don't have $537 million. Why is that relevant? Well, the point is that your money is always going to work much harder for you than you worked for it. So the important part, and what we're going to talk about today, is making sure that your money is in the right place at the right time so that you can maximize your retirement. So with that, let's get started. So this is our disclosure. So my firm is Vantage Point Financial. I'm going to give you a little bit more information about us here in just a minute. But we are a registered investment advisor. And so we will show you some case studies and some examples today. It's not meant to be advice or recommendation. So everybody's situation, of course, is different. So you can visit our website at vantagepoint-financial.com, and all of our SEC disclosures and our privacy policy and all that good stuff is on our website. So just got to go through the compliance to keep everybody happy. So I want to appreciate everybody joining us today. I know there's some of you that are just still hopping in here. Looks like some of you are existing clients, so I recognize some of the names here, so welcome. And then a lot of you, I know this is probably your first exposure to us, so which we appreciate you coming on to learn and get educated on this very important topic. So we're going to cover a lot. The reason that we've got it's a two-part session. So it's this kind of the webinar, kind of the educational part of it. And then we've got a one-on-one personal strategy session where you can meet with myself or one of our other fiduciary advisors to really answer your questions and just kind of make sure you have everything in alignment for your retirement. Now, I know some of you that are women on here that are single, some of you are married, some of you are widowed. You don't have to be single to be on this webinar. It really applies to all women. It kind of applies to a lot of retirees. So even if you're married currently, there's things that we want you to think about so that if your husband passes away first, there's things that you're going to want to need to know and have in place so that it doesn't derail your retirement. And vice versa. If you pass away first, it can be helpful for your husband as well. So we give you that 30-minute no-cost strategy session. And by attending the webinar and the strategy session, we're going to give you a copy of our book, Elevate Your Retirement. I co-authored this with our two other co-founders, my twin brother, Nick, and then Tim Kuntz. They run our Chicago location. So I'll give you more information on them in just a second. So there is a QR code on the screen there. You can scan that. There's just a couple questions that you have to answer, and then we can book your strategy session. We can do that either phone or Zoom, or if you're local to the St. Louis area where I'm at, you can come into our office here. So also in the top right-hand corner, there's a schedule now link there too, so you could schedule the strategy session, and that'll be up throughout the webinar. Also, kind of a housekeeping thing, the chat and the question and answer section, we actually have those turned off today because we really want to be respectful of you and your time. We find that sometimes those can be distracting for the other attendees, and we have that strategy session so that we can answer your questions one-on-one, and that's more relevant to you anyway. So I want to be respectful of everybody and their time to get through the content here and really provide a lot of value for you. So a little background about myself. I am the president of Vantage Point Financial. I've been in the financial planning industry. This is actually my 25th year. A little outdated on there, so it's 24 years. And I really enjoy helping people really build their retirement plan so that you can have clarity and confidence in your retirement. So I know it can be very overwhelming. And so we really simplify the process for you. And I think we've done a really good job of doing that over the years. And a lot of our clients are very pleased with the service that we offer them. So a little information about me personally. So you can see on the left-hand side of your screen there at a wedding. So that's my daughter, Michaela, that got married. She got married last year in September. And so on her left, your right-hand side is my wife, Amy, which is her stepmom, Michaela's stepmom. And then on the far right-hand side is Chaley. She's my stepdaughter. So second marriage for both my wife and I. And then the four-legged kids on the right-hand side, those are our dogs, of course. The black one is Ivy. She's a Bernedoodle, and Wrigley, he's a Golden Doodle. So those of you that have dogs, they're kind of like toddlers so that never grow up. So, but they're definitely members of our family. So, I have to have pictures of them. So now I run our St. Louis office, and so I live here in Wildwood, Missouri, with my family, just 15 minutes from the office. But we do have multiple locations. So we've got our St. Louis team here. So we've got 13 in our team in St. Louis. So those are pictured. So from all of our fiduciary advisors to our planning team, administrative team, operations, marketing, all that good stuff. And we also have an office in Chicago, just outside of Chicago in Lisle, Illinois. That's where Nick and Tim run that office that I co-authored the book with. And so they've got 15, actually I believe 16 now, in their office in Chicago. And then we also have an office in just outside of Detroit, Michigan, in Farmington Hills. We got 5 in there. So our kind of a satellite office of the Chicago location. And then we also have some strategic partners that we work with. We do have a Vantage Point tax firm in Chicago as well. We do have an estate planning attorney here locally in St. Louis. That's Abby Bogeman. We also have a online-based estate planning tool for all of our clients at no cost. So if you're new to us and estate planning is an important piece for you, please let us know in the strategy session. We've got a great resource that we can get a whole full estate plan built for you at no additional cost. So we also have a Medicare advisor. We have 2 real estate agents, one being my wife, Amy. We also have a mortgage broker for any mortgage needs that our clients might have. So our agenda today. So what unique challenges are women facing in retirement and how can we address them? Longevity. So women live longer. That's just the stats. So I want to make sure that your money lasts as long as you do. So every week I like to I use ChatGPT to search what retirees and pre-retirees are searching for. What are they looking for in their retirement? So when it comes to the financial part of it, most people are most concerned with running out of money, which makes sense because as people are living longer, and if women are living longer, it's a bigger concern for women than men. However, with inflation rising as it has over the last 4 or 5 years, after COVID, it really shot up. And then of course with healthcare and medicine and technology, we actually are living longer, which is great. But want to make sure your money lasts as long as you do. The other part of the kind of number one concerns that are non-financial is maintaining a purpose in retirement. And so, which is really important piece when you think about when you leave your job and you enter the retirement phase, you kind of leave behind sometimes part of your identity, a lot of friends and relationships you built. You may stay in contact with a handful of those people like a lot of people do. However, it's a big mental shift. There's a lot of psychology in entering that retirement phase. So we really help our clients on that end as well. So we're going to talk about wealth and asset control. We're going to talk about long-term care and health risks, and then of course rising taxes, and give you some strategies that you could potentially consider implementing to really give you a lot of clarity and confidence in your retirement. So at Vantage Point Financial, we have our own proprietary planning process called the Elevated Retirement Plan, and it looks at these 6 key areas. So it starts at the top with your goals and concerns. What do you really want out of your retirement? How do you want to live in retirement? When I think about my retirement, so I'm 48 years old today, so I'll probably retire in mid-60s. Although I really love what I do, so I don't know that I'll ever fully retire. I'll probably still be around part-time and keep my mind sharp and all that. But I really think about the enjoyment that I'm planning to have. So I'm a big golfer. I like to play golf, I like to travel, spend time with my family, hopefully grandkids at that time. And so I'm thinking about those fun things that we're going to look forward to. I'm not considered, when I'm in my mid-60s, thinking about what are the tax rates going to be, what's inflation going to be, what's the stock market going to be doing. Well, those are all important. When you have a well-coordinated retirement plan, those become less of a stressor and risk because you've overcome those before you get there. And the way we do that is implementing a very strong foundation of an income plan. So an income plan, of course, is going to have Social Security for almost everybody. You might have a pension, although most of those are gone by the wayside for most companies, aren't offered them anymore. A lot of the income that you're going to need to generate in retirement is kind of going to be on your shoulders to figure out how to create it. That's where we come in. When you look at your retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, all those important accounts that you spent all these years accumulating and saving for, how do you turn those into income? So we're going to kind of show you some examples here and how we can help. and really maximize your investments for income. So that next piece, the investment management, is there's a big shift. We're going to talk about that in a second, from the accumulation phase into the distribution phase. The relationship with your money and your retirement accounts changes when you retire. So we want to make sure that all of your investments are positioned properly so that you've got the right amount of money in the right bucket when you need it. Now, what we find is that most financial advisors in our industry, they only work in that investment management piece, which is very important. We don't want to overlook that by any means. The kind of gap for a lot of people is that their investment advisor generally doesn't plan their income and doesn't help on tax management or tax reduction strategies. So they've got these gaps where, yeah, you might have a good rate of return, but rate of return doesn't pay bills, income does. And you want the most tax efficient income to pay those bills. Or I should say, do you want efficient income to pay your bills? So that's tax efficient. So the tax management piece, we believe at Vantage Point that your tax plan is equally as important as your investment plan. And so by having a solid investment plan and income plan that incorporates your taxes before you get there and efficiently, number one, your money will last longer, your investments will be more efficient, you'll pay less tax. So it's really important to coordinate all three of those together. Now, healthcare and insurance, so we're going to touch on long-term care. So we also have, like I mentioned, a Medicare advisor here in Vantage Point. But when you think of healthcare, we think of long-term care, making sure you got that risk covered in some capacity. Some might self-insure, but most people need some form of insurance to cover the what if. And then legacy planning, so that's going to be estate planning is one piece of it. So those are your legal documents from trusts, wills, power of attorneys, healthcare directives, all that important stuff from a legal aspect. But there's also the other side of it is the legacy planning and transfer of wealth. Who do you want to get your money and how and when? So a well-coordinated plan is going to have the legal documents and the transfer of wealth over to the next generation or charities or whatever is important to you done efficiently. So we actually teach an estate planning course that you can access. Some of you may have already attended that. And you would be shocked to find out how many ultra wealthy people have had major missteps on their estate plan. So it's something very important you don't want to overlook. Like I mentioned, we do have an estate planning service that can actually build all your estate planning documents for you. If you're a client already, no cost. If you're interested in becoming a client, we'll show you how you can get that done when you come on board with us. So what I'll also ask you, when you look at this elevated retirement plan, would it be helpful if you had a plan all at one company that did all these things for you? Would it give you more clarity and confidence in your retirement? Hopefully for most people, the answer is yes. If you already have all that, that's great. Our strategy session will just give you a second opinion on that stuff to make sure you have everything in order and in alignment. So that strategy session, whether you have $500,000 or $15 million, it's right for you. So we can definitely help you. And worst case scenario, we give you peace of mind. Best case scenario, we put you on the best path possible for retirement. So longevity. So like we talked about, women statistically live longer. And so the average U.S. life expectancy, so that's in the updated 2024, women were just over 85 years, men were just over 82 years. At age 65, women can expect to live, roughly 20 more years, or men about 17 years. Longer lifespan increase the risk of outliving your savings and higher lifetime healthcare costs. So it's almost like kind of that feels like a double whammy. It's like, yeah, I want to live long, but I would make sure that my money lasts as long as I do. And like I mentioned, that kind of trivia question in the beginning, if you get your money in the right places, I think you would be really surprised at how well it works for you, even in retirement. So most people reduce risk when they get into retirement, which is important on a piece of your money. But if you have a well-coordinated plan, you can pretty efficiently continue to grow your net worth even while you're drawing your investments down. And we're going to show you how to do that. So wealth and asset control. So this is pretty interesting stuff here. So by 2030, women are projected to control 30 to 34 trillion in U.S. financial assets. So that's significant. Women currently hold about 38% of investable assets in the U.S. And by 2020 or in 2025, so women had controlled 42% of all companies worldwide by the end of 2025, I should say. By 2028, women will cross the tipping point and control more than half of leadership positions. So that's impressive. So women in the workforce are very valuable, of course, but they're going to actually have more of the leadership positions by 2028. So women are doing very well financially in leadership roles, and in many cases, women are better leaders than men. At least that's what my wife tells me. Only kidding. Women are leading companies, running governments, founding startups, and reshaping entire industries. So a very vital part of a team. It's, I think the having differences on management teams and executive teams, not just men and women, but other backgrounds, other types of expertise is really valuable in every company. So this makes sense. Women are an integral part of a successful business. So now we're going to start into something that we call the money cycle. So there's two primary phases of the money cycle. So the first part is what we call the accumulation phase. So the accumulation phase is all about saving your nest egg and growing that money for retirement. So specifically, when we think of accumulation and growing money for retirement, we think of like your employer-sponsored retirement plan. So like 401ks, 403bs, your individual IRAs, Roth IRAs. If you work for a government, it could be the TSP, it could be a 457 plan. But any retirement labeled account, the goal is growing that nest egg as big as possible. So the number one job in accumulation is growth. You want to grow that nest egg. Now, when you retire, you leave your job and you're no longer adding to your retirement accounts. You're now withdrawing from them. You enter the distribution phase, or some people call it the decumulation phase. So now we're no longer adding to our accounts. We're actually withdrawing from them. And so it's really important not to skip over a phase in the middle before you start distribution. Now that's called preservation. So the biggest mistake we see people make is they retire and they go from accumulation right into distribution where they didn't preserve anything in the middle before they got to retirement. And that can become a very expensive proposition depending on what the stock market's doing in the year you retire. So the solution here is something we call the bucket plan. So it's a very simple concept, but yet very powerful in practice. So we've been using this for many, many years. And our clients tell us that it's one of the best tools to use, not just from the functionality, but the simplicity of it as well. So there's three buckets. You have a now bucket, a soon, and a later. The now bucket is money that's all safe and liquid. So think of like an emergency account, a savings account at the bank, or a money market account. We're not concerned with the rate of return of that account. We're concerned with the safety and liquidity of it. We want to have access to that money whenever you need it. Now banks are paying 2 to 3, maybe 3.5% today. Still way better than it was, prior to COVID, when you would be lucky to get 0.25% at your savings account at the bank. But the goal is not growth there. We just want to make sure that it's safe and it's accessible when you need it. Now, there's no set amount that you should have in there. If you're still working, the old rule of thumb is about 3 to 6 months of expenses to make sure if you're to get laid off, or if you're out of work for an illness or whatever it might be, that you've got kind of a buffer there to cover expenses. Now, once you're retired, you're not going to fire yourself in retirement. I mean, I guess you could. Most people don't. You're not going to lose your job in retirement, so to speak. So you might not need as much when you're retired. So it really becomes like, what's the comfort level? However, you also want to set aside if you have any planned expenses coming up. So if you know you're going to take a big cruise for your 50th wedding anniversary, set that money aside. You're going to remodel the kitchen, set that money aside. We just don't want to take risk with things that we know we're going to spend in the next 12 months, maybe even 24 months. So the soon bucket, which I believe is the most important bucket in your retirement, is what I would refer to as the income bucket. So you want these assets to be very conservatively invested. And in some cases, if you can accomplish the goal with no risk, that's even better. But the whole focus is income. Now, when we think of the income there, we're thinking of the income that you need in retirement over and above Social Security and pensions. Or it could even be, let's say you retire at 62 and you don't start Social Security until age 67, you've got a 5-year gap. So we're going to fund enough money in there to not only fill that gap of Social Security, but anything in addition that you need. So this is really kind of where it all starts. How much income do you need to live comfortably in retirement? And then what we're going to do is we're going to map that out, and we're going to fund that soon bucket with the first 8 to 10 years of income need. at a very low risk so that we know no matter what the stock market's doing, your income is there and you can confidently withdraw that money. The later bucket is designed for more long-term growth. So the vast majority of the risk that you're taking would fit in that later bucket. Now, it all depends on, of course, risk level or your comfort level with risk, how much money you have where, when you need it, all that good stuff. So it's customized for everybody. But the concept is pretty simple. Once you turn on that soon bucket for income and you're drawing that down, we're going to proactively replenish it with gains from the later bucket proactively over time. So we like to stay about 3 to 4 years ahead of the need so that if we happen to have a downturn in the market, it's not going to affect your retirement income. So a very important tool in our overall planning process. So shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about long-term care and health risks. So women are more likely than men to need long-term care, 52% versus 39%. Average duration of long-term care, women are generally need about almost 4 years, where men are about 2.2 years. Now, my dad is actually in assisted living up in Eastern Iowa, where I grew up. And I would say in his assisted living center, it's about 80% women, 20% men. And that seems to be pretty consistent across the board. So women live longer naturally, so they tend to have longer stays in long-term care facilities or assisted living. So again, you want to plan for that. Nobody really wants to be in a nursing home, I understand, but you want to make sure that you plan for it. So women face higher risks of higher intensity care needs, such as dementia, mobility limitations. And again, that's just a function of you live longer, your body kind of starts to break down over time. So unfortunately, right? So health and caregiving expenses disproportionately impact women's retirement security. Kind of makes sense. So if you end up needing long-term care longer, therefore you're going to draw down more of your retirement assets sooner, or that you have to earmark for the long-term care. So there are some fantastic long-term care plans out there. They're not nearly as cumbersome or as restrictive as they used to be, but it's very customizable. So if you don't yet have a long-term care plan of any type of coverage yet, be sure to write that down. We'll talk to you about it at your strategy session. So it's a really important piece because if you think of insurance as homeowner insurance, car insurance, the number of claims versus long-term care, you're significantly more likely to use your long-term care insurance than your homeowner's insurance. So I kind of keep that in mind. So here's a snapshot. I know this is a very small print, so I apologize if you can't see it on your screen very well. If you look at that right-hand column, you're looking at calendar year of 2025. So this is in St. Louis, Missouri. I think it's a good measuring stick for the Midwest. If you happen to live on either coast, these numbers are going to be low. So what it's showing is home health care. So it's kind of hard to read there. The home health care service is about $82,000 for the year. So what that means is if you're living at home and you're using home health aides that are coming in, if you have kind of the full service home health aides, it's about $82,000. The adult daycare is about $27,000. And so some people aren't as familiar with adult daycare. That's just very, very similar structure to child daycare, where you would go there in the morning and then you would go home in the evening. So you wouldn't stay overnight in the daycare. It's just during the day. So if your spouse is working or your spouse is no longer living, and maybe your kids are helping to take care of you, it's a nice kind of balance between not having the full home health care at your house all the time. And it's a lower cost too. So depending on mobility issues and all that stuff, it could be a good short-term use for some people. Assisted living, we're looking at about $75,000. And then the full long-term care centers for a private room, about $103,000 here in St. Louis. So I don't expect these to go down anytime soon. I expect them to consistently continue to go up. So if you're, say, 65 today and you end up in a nursing home at, say, 82, these numbers are going to be significantly higher. Now, I don't say that to scare you, but I do tell you that because if you're in pretty good health right now, you can get a great plan that's pretty affordable. So, and there are some plans that I like to explain it as if you have a decent amount of assets, you can take a piece of one of your assets and just shift it over into a different bucket or a different pocket, so to speak, to set aside for long-term care. They can really multiply for a significant amount of coverage. So again, a lot of options out there. Don't have enough time today to dive into all the long-term care options, but definitely encourage you to inquire when we talk about our strategy session. So now talking about taxes. So nobody likes paying taxes. The good news is that the tax bill that was passed in July of 2025, part of the One Big Beautiful Bill, it actually extended the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017. So our tax rates actually, the marginal rates stayed the same. They were set to expire and go up. So they're going to go back to the 2017 levels if they didn't put it in this tax bill in 2025. So pretty significant savings overall in the big picture. Because most people would have seen about a 25 to 30% increase in their tax bill had it reverted back to the 2017 tax code. Now, when you look at the marginal rates, you might say, well, that seems kind of high, Jeremy. Are you sure? When I say averages, we're looking at everybody, right, from low income to high income. But also, one of the main reasons is the standard deduction now is significantly more than double what it was in 2017. So that's a big part of it, too. Deductions would have been a lot less. So when we think of taxes, tax evasion is illegal, but tax avoidance is highly recommended. So it's really, really important to plan for your taxes. And one thing that you'll find when you get into retirement, when you would expect that your tax situation is more simplified, in fact, for most people, it's actually more complex. And sadly, that's by design. So I always ask people, if you don't have a tax plan when you enter retirement, you will automatically qualify for the government tax plan. That's not a good thing to qualify for. The government tax plan is designed so that every year as you age, your tax bill continues to increase. And I'll show you why that is in a second. So the tax triangle here. So there's kind of three parts of the triangle. So there's a tax me always down in the left-hand corner that's in red. The right-hand corner, there's a tax me later. And at the top, there's a tax me never again. Notice that's green. Never being taxed again is a positive thing. So the tax me always. So the types of accounts that are going to fit into the tax me always. The most basic, if you have a savings account at the bank or a CD at the bank, as you earn interest every year on those, you're taxed on those every year. So you're taxed always. If you own a non-retirement like brokerage account, could be an individual brokerage account or a joint brokerage account with a spouse. Let's say you're invested in a bunch of stocks and they pay dividends. All those dividends you're going to be taxed on every year. So even if you didn't sell the stock, you're still going to be taxed on those dividends. So those are types of vehicles and investments and savings accounts that get taxed every year. On the right-hand side, the tax me later, those are going to be your pre-tax retirement accounts. So like your pre-tax 401ks, traditional IRAs, even rollover IRAs, things that are tax deferred, they're going to tax you later. So when you take withdrawals out during your retirement, that's when they're going to tax you. Now, if you don't already know about the required minimum distributions, that's something to keep an eye on. When you turn age 73, the IRS forces you to take money out of your qualified retirement accounts, 401ks and IRAs. If you haven't yet, you have to start by then. And it's approximately 4%, just under 4% the first year. The first 5 years averages just over 4%. But every year as you age, the amount they force you to take out goes up. So that means the reason that happens is they want you to take some money out of those accounts because they let you defer the taxes for all your working years. So now they want you to pay the tax man. And since that percentage increases every year, that means you're taking more money out of your retirement accounts each year. That's shown up on your tax return. Therefore, not only are you paying more tax on that money that comes out, you're paying on your Social Security, any other investments you have that are shown up on the tax return, any other income. It's kind of a stacking thing. It's pushing that tax bill up. So frequently we get a question, people ask, at what age do I get to stop paying taxes? Unfortunately, taxes are not age-based. So you do get some extra deductions at certain ages, which we'll talk about in a second. However, the challenge or disappointing part is there's only two time periods when you get to stop paying taxes. The first one is when you run out of money. The second one is when you die. So neither are very favorable. So if you have income coming in, you're going to pay tax. So it's important to make sure it's efficient. The top one is the tax me never again. So those most commonly, the most popular one of those is a Roth IRA account. So we're going to talk about Roths in just a second. But a Roth is tax-free when you take it out. There could be other things like cash value of life insurance. In many cases, you can take your cash value out tax-free. So that can be a potentially good vehicle if you have those policies in place, or if you put one in place, even in retirement. It's actually a pretty popular tool for tax-free income. What's important is figuring out, how much money do you have in each of these areas? So your homework assignment. So what I want you to do after the webinar here, or whenever you get a chance next day or two, take out a sheet of paper and list all of your financial accounts, checking accounts, savings accounts, investment accounts, 401ks, IRAs. List out the type of account that it is. It's my 401k. Is it pre-tax? So is it tax me always? So that would be a post-tax account. Is it a tax me later? That would be pre-tax. Or is it tax me never again, like a Roth or things that might not be taxed again? So and figure out and ask yourself, do I potentially have a tax problem? Most people, the answer is yes. The reason that most people have a tax problem is that the vast majority of all the money you have saved for your retirement is probably in pre-tax. It's probably in that tax me later, which means you're going to have a growing tax bill if you don't do something about it now. And the reason that is, when you think back to when you first started working, so, back in, for some of you, the 70s, 80s, early 90s, 401ks became very popular, but all you had was a pre-tax option. So it was, if you're going to save it at your company and get that free match, it was all tax-deferred money, which was great because you weren't taxed on it when it went in, but now when you take it out, you have to be taxed on it. So, but there are ways around it, and there are strategies that we can help you implement to reduce your taxes and drastically reduce them over your entire retirement life. So it's not just a tax strategy that looks at today, or tomorrow. It looks at the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years of your retirement. So when I talk about that tax me never again, the Roth IRAs fit in there. So I'm going to show you a Roth conversion example. So for starters, a Roth IRA is money that goes in after tax, and then it all grows 100% tax-free. So you never pay tax on the gains in a Roth. Whereas if you have a traditional IRA, let's say you deposit this year, you can put up to $8,600 if you're over age 50. So that amount went up. So you can put $8,600 if you're still working. And you don't have an employer 401k. You put $8,600 in a traditional IRA. Well, that's an $8,600 tax deduction on your tax return. But then as that grows and you use it later on down the line in retirement, you have to pay tax on that money. Where the Roth is great, you only had to pay tax on that initial contribution. And so it's a fantastic vehicle to grow tax-free growth. So Roth conversion example. So the IRS, years ago, there used to be limitations on it. So I want to make one distinction here real quick. A Roth contribution, you're limited to the $8,600 if you're over age 50 this year, or $7,500 if you're under age 50. That's contribution amount. That's different than conversion. So a conversion is taking money that you already have in a pre-tax retirement account, could be a pre-tax 401k or a traditional IRA or rollover IRA, and you're moving it from that pre-tax account to the Roth account. The IRS has no limit on that. If you have $500,000 in that IRA and you want to move it into the Roth IRA, you can do that. The challenge becomes any dollar amount that you move from the traditional or pre-tax account into the Roth is taxed in the year you do that. So you want to be careful how much you do and when. So at Vantage Point, one of the analysis we'll run for you is figuring out, number one, do you have a tax problem? Number two, does a Roth conversion make sense? And if so, when and how much should we do? We'll help you figure all that out. So here's an example of someone taking $100,000 out of their pre-tax IRA and moving it into the Roth. So if they did it this calendar year, the current federal tax code is 22%. Now, we're in the state of Missouri. Some of you might be in states that don't have state income tax. But just as an example, we're going to say this was a married couple that were in the 22% federal tax bracket. So that $100,000 federally is going to cost them $22,000. The state of Missouri is right around 5%. So round numbers, about $5,000 there. Total tax cost for them would be $27,000 to move $100,000 from the pre-tax into the Roth. So some of you may be saying, wow, $27,000, that's a pretty expensive tax bill to move that from the pre-tax into the Roth. And it is. That's the painful part of doing a conversion. However, when we do that analysis, we're going to figure out what's the optimal amount for you and what could you be saving by doing it. So we're going to figure out what's the break-even point, how long will it take me to recoup that tax money. Also, what should I do with that money if I'm going to do a conversion? So I have a rule of thumb for all of our clients is that if you're going to do a conversion, you want to make sure you can let that money sit for about 8 to 10 years before you touch it. That way, as that's all growing, you're recovering that tax cost plus the benefit of all that growth moving forward tax-free. So I want to make sure that we have a strategy behind it. And then when you need it in the future, it's all tax-free. So the question is, do you believe tax rates are going to go down in the future? If you believe they're going to go down, a Roth conversion might not make sense. However, if you think they're going to stay the same or go up, a Roth conversion is usually very beneficial for almost everybody. I say almost everybody because there are some cases where it doesn't necessarily make sense. So our job is to help you figure out, does it make sense? If so, how do we maximize it? However, let's say you did that conversion. If you invested that $100,000 and it earns 7.2% annually, your money would double in 10 years. So that means our $100,000 would grow to $200,000. Now, some of you are thinking, because I get this question a lot when I teach this, if we paid $27,000 in tax and we did a $100,000 conversion, wouldn't I only have $73,000 to actually invest? Well, if you took the tax money out of the conversion, yes, that would be true. However, we do not recommend that you do it that way. So you can, however, you're going to have a longer time horizon to recoup the taxes. What we would recommend, if possible, take that tax money out of a separate account that isn't taxable. So if you had, a savings account at the bank, a CD or a money market account that was all after tax money, it's not going to trigger an additional tax cost to you. So, but you can have the IRA or the 401k actually pay the tax for you. And instead of a $100,000 balance, you'd start with the 73. So, but ideally, we're saying we're paying the tax outside of the conversion amount. So if that 100 grows to 200,000, now let's say now that it's doubled in value 10 years later, now if you withdraw that money, how much tax are you going to pay? Zero, because you already paid it, right? So that's why we have that X over that 27,000. You don't have to pay it again. However, that 13.5%, all that is signifying is now we have a $200,000 account balance. We paid $27,000 in tax. We divide that $27,000 into $200,000. That's a net effective tax rate of 13.5% if we were to withdraw it. Again, we don't pay any more tax, but that's just saying that's actually what we paid. So that would say that saved us money, right? We paid 27%. So our effective when we used it was 13.5. That's a win. So we won, right? And let's say you don't need it. So we're not withdrawing the money and that money doubles again. So another 10 years at 7.2%, it's going to grow to 400,000. So now your 100,000 worth 400,000. Again, you don't have to pay tax again. Even if you withdraw the whole thing, it's all tax free now. So again, we want to divide that 27,000 into what our balance is. The 400,000, so 6.75% is what the net effective tax rate would be or have been if you withdrew that 400,000. So now, as a comparison, if you were to withdraw $400,000 from an IRA account and you were in that 22% tax bracket when you started, so let's assume that was your other income, Social Security, other income sources, and all that good stuff. I mean, it took 500 or 400,000 on top of that, you'd pay at least $148,000 in tax here in the state of Missouri anyway. Very similar in a lot of other states. So the question becomes, do you want to pay $27,000 in tax or do you want to pay $148,000 in tax? I'm going with 27. Anybody that says 148,000, we might have to send you to the psychologist. But the most important thing with the Roth conversion is, number one, having a plan behind it. When am I potentially going to use it? What's my current tax rate? What's my future tax rate going to be when I might need to use that money? Is it going to be higher than it is today or lower? And if we're going to do conversions, what's the plan behind it? So for most of our clients, we usually do a Roth conversion strategy over a number of years. So we're doing smaller amounts each year over a window of time. And so again, on your strategy session, jot that down. We'll definitely cover that for you and figure out if it's a benefit to you. So I want to show you a case study. So now here's Mary. So she retired at age 62. Unfortunately, her husband passed away in January of 2025 at age 67. Their assets were about 1.5 million total. Her husband was managing their accounts, and he preferred more market risk than Mary does today. So he was more of a risk taker, and he had done well, and obviously he grew the accounts. But Mary wasn't as comfortable, especially when he was gone. It wasn't something that she enjoyed or wanted to handle, so it made her uncomfortable. So, of course, she hired our firm to take care of that for her. Her Social Security, her benefit at her age 67 would be $2,000. So she's not there yet because she was only 62 when he passed away. So 63 now today. Survivor benefit would be $3,000 if she elected at age 67. So the way the Social Security survivor benefit works, you get to keep the higher of the two. However, in this case, her husband was actually receiving the Social Security at 67. So he had just started at his full retirement age. So for her benefit, so she could start her own benefit. And this is what she ended up doing. So she actually retired. We started her benefit, that $2,000 or sorry, her benefit is a smaller amount. The survivor benefit, she has to wait. She could start the survivor benefit today. So sorry if I confuse you guys. So let's just talk about the survivor benefit. So if she started that today, because she's only 62 in this case, when he passed away, she would only get 2,100. So there's an age reduction even on the survivor benefit. However, if she waits until she's 67, she gets his full $3,000 a month. Now, what's great about the survivor benefit, she can actually start her own now, which she did actually, and then she could switch to that survivor benefit, that $3,000 a month, when she gets to age 67. So it's pretty flexible. So be aware that there are some pretty good flexible options on Social Security. So she had no pension. Her monthly income need was $6,000 a month. So she's uncomfortable managing her own investments, is concerned about how long her money will last, and the increased taxes she's going to have to pay. So the challenge when a spouse passes away, two important things happen, unfortunately. You lose one of the Social Security benefits, so that goes away. And then you also you go from married filing jointly from a tax perspective down to a single tax filer, and the tax brackets are smaller and the rates are slightly higher. So it becomes more of a tax challenge for a single person versus a married person. And so she was very concerned naturally. So here's what her bucket plan looked like when her husband passed away. So she had $25,000 in the checking and savings. And then the rest of her money, because her husband was a pretty high risk taker, he had everything what we would consider in the later bucket, more growth level of risk. He was still managing the investments as if they were still working in that accumulation phase. So he was comfortable with it. Obviously pretty lucky that the stock market did pretty well in 23 and 24, and he passed away in 25. But Mary was uncomfortable. So you'll notice in the middle there's a question mark. They didn't really have anything that we would consider a soon bucket account. So they were taking a pretty significant risk on their income they were withdrawing from their investments. So for Mary, on her income plan, so we're going to delay his survivor benefit till 67. We're going to deposit $365,000 into what we call an income annuity. At age 67, it's going to pay her $40,000 a year for life. So not recommending or promoting any products on this webinar. However, there's some significant benefits to using annuities to create lifetime income streams, and that's what worked best for Mary. And so we're also going to move $360,000 into a low risk portfolio for her to confidently withdraw that $6,000 a month between now and age 67. And so at age 67, Mary's going to elect the survivor benefit of the Social Security, and she's going to turn on the annuity. So now with cost of living raises on the Social Security, she's going to have about $80,000 in guaranteed income, 40 from Social Security and 40 from that annuity that she funded 5 years ago, or would have been 5 years at that point. She's also going to do a Roth conversion, or I should say she did a Roth conversion in 2025. Because he passed away in January of 2025, she still got to use a joint tax filing for that calendar year. So even though he was only alive in the month of January, even if he died on January 1st, she'd still get to claim married filing jointly for that tax year. So we were able to do a pretty significant conversion. So we did a $150,000 Roth conversion, moved from her IRA into her Roth. She pays tax on the $150,000 as ordinary income. This conversion stays in the 22% tax bracket. Had she waited and done that in 2026, instead of paying 22%, because she was a single tax filer, she would have paid 32%. So all growth is tax-free moving forward, and her RMDs will actually be less. At her RMD age is 75. So if you're 73 before 2033, that's your RMD age, required distributions out of pre-tax accounts. If you're not 73 until 2033 or later, it jumps to age 75. So a little bit longer window for her. So now here's her bucket plan after we instituted her plan. So she kept that $25,000 in the now bucket for her emergency account. And now we've got about $725,000 in the soon bucket. So we've got that income annuity. We got part of her IRA. We also have part of Mary's brokerage account in that soon bucket. And we're going to utilize that with some of those monthly withdrawals to offset taxes. So to keep her in a lower tax bracket. So using what we call blended withdrawals across a couple different accounts to keep the taxes lower. And then the later bucket is going to be the balances of all those other accounts that continue to grow and accumulate to be used later on in retirement. So here's kind of the challenges and the potential solutions. So for women facing, obviously, whether you're single, married, divorced, widowed, having a comprehensive plan really helps to look at all these potential challenges. So longevity of your money, the solution is guaranteed income strategies. So if you're concerned about running out of money, or if you're concerned about the stability of Social Security, I just saw a report from the Congressional Budget Office last week, as a matter of fact, that they're projecting that the Social Security Trust Fund will actually be depleted by 2032 now. Previously, it had kind of bounced from 2033 to 2035. Well, now they're saying it's probably 2032. Now, what's going to happen there if Congress doesn't act? That means that they potentially could have about a 20% reduction of all Social Security benefits across the board. Now, I don't know for sure if that's what they would do. You never really know with Congress. Hopefully, they'll make some changes before we get there. But if you're concerned about Social Security making major changes that can negatively impact you, having a plan B to replace that Social Security income, we can help you do that. The sooner you do, the better that's going to be. So increase in taxes, so implement tax reduction strategies. Now, we just showed you one of them, but we've got many, depending on your situation, that can really help you reduce taxes throughout your whole retirement. So we kind of level off that tax bill versus an increasing tax bill. Higher medical costs. So you want to be sure to include in your budget for long-term care. So whether it's purchasing long-term care insurance, there's a lot of hybrid policies out there, or if you're self-insuring, what bucket of money or what account you have set aside to use for long-term care. You just want to have a plan behind it so that you're not blindsided and your retirement doesn't get derailed because of a healthcare event. So ask yourself, is this the type of planning you're looking for? So if it is, then let's definitely talk. Again, if you feel like you have a lot of those things already in place, that's okay. That strategy session, we'll just give you confirmation. We really want to give you a lot of confidence in your retirement, whether you're 10 years from retirement today or you've already been retired for 10 years. Hopefully you have a lot of longevity, and it makes sense to continually get kind of a second opinion or overview of kind of where you're at. So our elevated retirement plan can give you a lot of clarity and confidence to either get you on the right path or shore up any shortfalls that you might have. So before we end, I want to leave you with this. So this is something we call the futures model. So if you think about where we're at today, so what type of an experience do you want to have in your retirement? So for some of you that aren't retired yet, hopefully you're looking at a long retirement of 20 to 30, maybe even 40 years if you're lucky. What kind of an experience do you want to have? So most people would say, give me the green line. I want an ideal experience. So when we think about our retirement, we think about those fun things that we work so hard to kind of kick back and relax and enjoy our family and travel and all those things. We want it to be ideal. What people don't plan for is they don't plan for a crisis in retirement. However, what we find is usually people will drift, inadvertently. They're not choosing that crisis line. They're just putting it on the back burner. Yeah, I'm not that old yet. I'll worry about it when I get close to retirement. You're not really thinking proactively. And so you just kind of drift. And then you might end up with a long-term health event you didn't plan for that derailed your retirement. If you ended up taking way too much risk in the stock market, and all of a sudden you retired in a really bad year, it could be very costly. So what we want to do is help you get on that green line. Now, we cannot guarantee you results. So I can't guarantee what the stock market's going to do. I can't guarantee that the government's not going to raise taxes. I can't guarantee you that Social Security is going to be solvent for your entire retirement. But I can guarantee the path. So through our elevated retirement plan, if we make good decisions along the way, we can keep you on that green line. It's still going to be a little bit like this, but we want to take away that huge swings or huge volatility in your retirement. So we can help you make good decisions along the way that encompass all these 6 areas. Specifically making sure you have a solid foundation on your income, your investments, your taxes, all that good stuff. So we can keep you on that green line to really give you a lot of confidence. Now, here's the good news. Regardless of where you're at today, you're the closest you're ever going to be to that green line. So what I mean by that is the longer you stay drifting away, the further away you're going to get from that ideal retirement. So it just takes one decision. And so that one decision today is to schedule that 30-minute strategy session. And again, we can go through any questions you have about the material we talked about today or any other concerns you might have in retirement. It's an open forum. It's all free game. We have over 150 years of experience just in my office in St. Louis from all of our advisors and our planning team. So we've heard or seen everything that you can ask us. So and our goal, again, we just want to give you clarity and confidence in your retirement. So Really appreciate you joining us. Again, want to make sure we get you a copy of our book. So if you come into the office for the strategy session, of course, we'll physically hand it to you. If we do it over Zoom or phone, we'll mail you a copy of the book. If you scan that QR code, or you can click on the top right-hand corner, the little Schedule Now button, and we'll, again, just a few questions on there, and then our team will get you on the calendar. So really appreciate everyone coming out today. And again, that's our QR code there. This has been brought to you by Vantage Point Financial. Appreciate everybody being here with us today, and enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk soon.